and we're sitting there talking about what we do.
Back in 1988, so that was 98. Yeah, wow.
It's about, so 77 was my first show.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody, and I'm pretty excited today to have Owen Webb here.
Thank you.
And welcome, Owen.
I'm excited to be here, actually. So looking forward to it.
And it's come about because we had a pretty good chat at Summernats this year, just about how much things have changed and evolved with the elite cars.
Yeah.
And of course, when we started, there wasn't such a thing as an elite car.
They were all
cars,
judged
They
together.
were all cars.
Yeah.
And obviously through that process, I think we met 88 in Wagga. So I had the burgundy car.
And that was the first time I saw rock solid.
Yes. Yeah, it was the first version, I think.
And I've probably told you this story before, but I'm always pride myself on being an innovator and not copying. But I saw the engine bay on that car, and I thought that's the first Falcon smooth engine bay I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I want one of them. So that's what I got on my XY.
So there you go. So I mean, that was probably from the National, so 86.
Yeah, when I saw that,
yeah, and you would have had your ute there.
Yeah, have a black XW ute.
Yep.
And I had bought that XY out of Melbourne, and didn't really have a plan, which is my big thing which I really hone in on. But I knew I wanted a plan, but I didn't have it then. So when I saw your car, I thought, smooth engine bay is the first thing that's going to happen to that Falcon.
And we all know what a pain that is to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it's interesting how all those things have evolved. And obviously, you did very well with that. And I have some vivid memories of that car. And I'm sure it was at Rickshaw's. Did you go to Rickshaw's?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, at Newcastle. And it was displayed on an Australian flag.
It was.
And that was awesome. I loved that.
Yeah.
And I mean, everyone knows I'm patriotic and I fly the flag outside and all that sort of stuff. But when I seen that, I have no doubt that maybe had a little bit to do with putting the flag on the coupe.
Yeah.
Because displaying the car is as important as building the car
100%,
to me. And we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. Yeah. But that's the sort of thing that's burned into my brain about that car and the graphics and the way it was displayed.
And even though they weren't, on today's standards, they weren't flash graphics, but back at the time, they were pretty innovative back in the day.
Well, I mean, it was, and the use of colour and the iridescence in it, it was out there. It was just that, you would have been the same as me. We were pretty much copying what the Yanks were doing. And I was buying, Carcraft.
Of course.
Hot rodding, all those sorts of things from the US, which used to be grossly expensive, those magazines back in the day. But, so what I wanted to talk about today, Owen, is from that discussion we had at Summernats, is just about the judging system, because people see it as a bit of a, black magic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is, I believe, and I promote it all the time, about understanding what people are doing if they're trying to win trophies. And clearly, my biography is called Trophy Hunter, and you can go and see that on the channel. But my aim has always been about building these cars to achieve, high level in the judging process, as much as the car being able to be used or anything else. So I've always understood it, but I think there's a huge amount of people out there that don't.
Yeah, and that can be for several reasons. But a lot of people are not so much not prepared, but sometimes you've got to look through different websites or talk to different people or listen to a show like this so you can actually understand the system. And I know, knowing you well enough, you would always go after that, because there's two main things there. If you're building a car to win, you need to understand what class, so classification, and then the whole system, the judging system.
Yeah. And I mean, if I'm talking to a customer, and I've done a bit of consultancy where people will come to me and say, I want to build a car, how do I go about it? And one of my first questions is what's the purpose of the car?
100%.
And
man, you have hit on something here. Sorry to jump in there, but you've hit a real nerve with me, because I've probably been trying for 15 years to get people to actually come up with a really, really serious plan, because I have seen way too many cars get to a stage where they've spent minimum of 50 to 100,000, and then the whole thing just runs out of legs, and they end up with another builder. They chop all that out and start again. So they've just blown 100,000, and it just drives me insane.
And I think from a lot of perspective, And I mean, Tailspin, and I spoke about it in the build series with Tailspin, it's about having a goal. And that goal doesn't always have to be number one car. It might be the best in its class, you know, which could even be like the Cobra 400 was a restored car. It could be to win Pro Touring or best engine bay or whatever it is, but there needs to be a plan to achieve that and then understanding how it goes.
But even, again, to jump in there, but even Grand Champion, that's not very often that is the top judge car.
True.
That's a car that is judged really, really well, popular with the people, but then drives really well.
Yeah.
So if you want to win that, that's not necessarily the best judge car.
And I know you and I have had the discussion with a lot of people, and I had the discussion with the guys this year with the Statesman. You know, you've won top judge.
Yeah.
We won People's, and we're not going in the event.
Yeah.
I have no doubt they were well and truly up in the People's Choice.
Yes.
I said, you need to think really hard about whether you're in a position to drive it, because now is your best opportunity.
Yeah, 100%.
And I recall you and I speaking with Gary Myers when he built the Mustang the first time.
Yeah.
Gary and I were in the hall putting water in it because it was on alcohol, so it didn't need any water. So to do the events, and he chose to do that to make sure it was going to be able to run and put it in the events. He had no intention, but as we know, it then went on to win.
Yeah.
And it's about knowing when is the right time to do those things.
Yeah.
But we've probably jumped way ahead. But what I'd like to do is just for you to give us a bit of a short version of how you ended up where you ended up. Obviously, you know, we're talking the 80s, and then I've known you as a judge for a long, long time. So just give us a bit of a rundown on how that all came about.
Yeah, interesting. It's really interesting if you look back and put yourself at certain stages of your life. You wouldn't think, if somebody said to you then, oh, you're going to be doing this or you're going to do that, you wouldn't have any idea. And that's exactly how it was with me. I was very fortunate. I finished school on a Friday, and I started work as an apprentice panel beater on the Monday. And absolutely, it was at a Ford dealership.
So you're a beater or a painter?
Well, I'm both actually.
Yeah,
because
well, there you go.
Back in those days, we were doing everything. Now they have assemblers and maskers and colour matches. We're doing everything. So I was fortunate time for me. And what an era to be worked. First car I ever worked on was an XW Falcon, so I guess that's where my love of those type cars come from. But I absolutely loved that, the apprenticeship, loved working on cars, and obviously got a XW Ute, was the first one, black one, painted black, done a few shows and really liked that, and went to early events before, like Street Machine Nationals, before it was Summernats, and then done okay at a couple of events, and got to know Chick Henry, and he saw some of my work because I was painting a few other cars and they were doing really well, and he said, would you like to be a judge? And I went, I don't really know, I've never really thought about it. And Chick and I struck up a very good relationship even back then, and I said, yeah, let's give it a go. So I started out at Summernats too, so I've been to every Summernats, first one as an entrant, and since then judging in some capacity. And
you told me the other day you've been to every Rockynats,
yes,
and every Red Centrenats as well, and I would
every Motorex,
and every Motorex, and I would think you would be the only person that could probably say that, Owen. I really do.
Yeah, well, there you go. So does that just make me old or experienced? Which one?
Experience.
So, and it was interesting because I went there as a body and paint judge at the second Summernats and moved on from there. And then probably about Summernats 10, Chick said, would you like to be a chief steward? I said, oh, I don't really know about that. I'm not sure. But then we talked about it and what it covered, and then how we wanted to always progress, move with the industry, and have new judges coming through. So we always were on top of the new events, of the new trends, and that in the trade. And so I absolutely I've actually felt it a privilege, because people come and say to me, oh, I'd hate your job, or how do you get through all these cars? But I actually think it's a privilege to be able to see the best cars in Australia being built, and then have some sort of role in judging those.
And I mean, I know that you've spent a lot of time, either through your employment or in your own time, to actually go to a lot of the places that are building these cars and help with the process for them to achieve their goals.
Very much. That's what's really important to me now.
A genuine personal interest to see the sport grow and those people achieve their goals, because there is a science to it. Yeah,
that's right. And I don't do pretty much hardly any judging now, but I oversee a few of the different events. But what my main role now is with Andy and the Summernats guys is actually call on builders building cars and give that direction and find out what they really want to achieve and sort of give that direction to them. So I feel very privileged to be able to be looking at some of the best builders and looking at the best cars being built. Yeah.
So getting sort of a bit deeper into the judging side of it, a lot of people may not be aware that most shows have their own system.
Yes.
Now we know now that Motorex, Summernats, Red Centre and Rocky are all operated by the same company.
Yeah.
Are the judging systems the same at all four for the elite?
All except for Motorex.
Right.
But as in driving events.
Yep. So the other three is the same system.
Shows and some different awards, but basically the same system. Same judges, same system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which leaves Motorex in this particular instance. So I'm aware, and clearly you're well aware, that, and the public may not be aware, is that with Motorex, it's all about putting on a show.
100%.
And it's called Superstars for a reason.
For a reason.
And part of the judging system there is the actual stand that the car's on makes up a part of the point system. Now, it used to be, around 10%? That'd still be about the case?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So people need to understand that when you see these cars at Motorex, and you might think, how is there a difference? And, the amount of money people spend on a stand, there's actually a criteria for the whole setup. And I tried to find it on the site the other day and was struggling a bit, but it's traditionally always been there, where you can go in and someone, probably yourself, has written down the criteria for all of those areas, including the stand.
Correct.
And that part of that criteria is that you're looking for a stand that the public can see the car as much as possible, because it's always difficult to fully display these cars. But secondly, so the judges can judge it properly, because
look at every critical
bit. And Summernats is a good example of all of these Unveiled cars. Even this year with the new system, the cars aren't going over the ramps anymore. So the poor old undercarriage judge's got a big job to do now. But Motorex is different in the sense it's Superstars. There's a full day allowed for setup, and the cars are required to be displayed in a manner fitting of Grandmaster.
That's exactly right, and that's a really good description, because back in the day when we first started Motorex and Superstars, that wasn't part of the criteria, and Bruce Morrison from Motoractive, he and I sat down and had this foresight that we've got to put on a show here that the public, if they're not car people as well as car people, can look at that and go, wow, look at that, that's really a piece of art. And part of that was absolutely the display. So 10% of the points were as the display, and boy, didn't that cause some controversy when we first brought that in, as all judging does.
And it's funny, Bruce spoke to me prior, because at that point I wasn't building, and he pulled me aside at Summernats the year before that all started and said, what do you think?
What do you think, yeah.
And I said to him, well, you're in a position to start something new here, and if we're going to present ourselves like the Yanks do, there needs to be some incentive. And clearly that's worked. And I think when we did Tailspin, which is the only car I've had at that level, we put a lot of time, or Adam and Kylie put a lot of time into the manufacture of a stand, but also to ensure that we had everything that we could on that stand, still photos, video, even audio, we had headphones, the whole thing, so that we could show that car in its best light. And, fortunately for us, we've obviously got it right, because it won the gold medal for the stand and the presentation everywhere it went. And I think that's indicative of understanding the system.
Yes, it is.
Because people build beautiful stands, but the judges can't walk on the stand.
Yeah.
If you put a full glass bed down, then how does the judge judge
Get in
the
there to judge it,
undercarriage
yeah.
when the criteria says,
Yeah.
well, it used to, it
Still does.
still does, that there needs to be access for the judges
Yeah.
to be able to judge the car.
Which makes sense. You've got to be able to
You've
get
got
up
to be
there and
able
look
to
at
get in
it.
there.
Yeah.
So it has an effect on the result. So moving along with the...
But just on that, before you
Yep.
move off that, obviously, as a overall, we never wanted the stand to make the difference. Like, the best car still should win, right? But, and I reckon maybe it was touch and go in the first or second year, but I can guarantee you after that there was a lot of good stands being built.
There was.
Which is what that was
all
all about. Yeah.
But I think with as good as the cars are, you know, and there was a couple last year that either decided that they weren't in the running and didn't choose to build the stand to the level that was required.
Yeah.
And, you know, it becomes obvious to me, you know, you walk in the hall for the Superstars finalist and there's a car there with a bit of nylon rope with some stands, and you think, well, you've obviously made a decision.
I think I know the car you're talking about, and I looked at that car and that realistically should have been in the top 6, but it actually wasn't in the top 6. So
Because of the stand.
Because of the stand.
I've had this, you know, we've qualified with Boss XC, and I've had this discussion with the owner. I said, you're in a position now where you need to make a choice that when we take the car down there, whether you're going to go down and show the car to the public or whether you're going to go down and compete.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to go down and compete, you've got to put your hand back in your wallet and build a stand that's going to achieve the points. Because if we stick it back on the Mustang stand and put a few mirrors and stuff under it, the public will see what they need to see, and we'd lift it up off the ground this time. But you're going to put yourself as a disadvantage.
Yeah.
You're not going to lose any gold medals from it. If you've got the best paint, you're still going to have the best paint.
Correct.
But if you're looking for Super 6 or you're looking for Grandmaster,
you need to have a good stand.
Then realistically, you need to have a good stand and make sure everything is 100%.
Yeah. And I got a guy this year, and part of what we're talking about, I'm fortunate enough to do is go around and talk to a lot of these builders, and there'll be a car in Superstars this year, and I know for a fact they want to display it properly, but they know that is such a part of the criteria that they'll probably spend 30, 40. And it's not about the money, but they'll spend that money to get that car exactly
where it needs to be,
where it looks to be, because so it still looks right. But you can get under and have a look at it. It looks good to the public. And so that's awesome. What's
so
actually
I
how it's ended up.
5 years ago, the tailspin stand with them doing it themselves still come in at 18 grand or something.
Yeah.
And that's the reality that people need to understand at this level.
Yeah.
You know, it is the pinnacle of what we do. And I was reading something the other day when I was doing some research on you, was that. We are, our best cars are as good as the best cars in the US.
100%. There is no doubt about that. And every single person from Chip Foos, John Kosmosky, Troy Trapani, all the people I brought out, they get blown away with that. And it's like per population, like it might only be the top 3%, 4%.
We're 10% of the US population, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we actually are punching way above our weight.
Yeah.
And we have all the cars that have gone over there. You look at Mercury's, Mario's car, all the cars that have gone over there have done well. Always
Even
done
all the way back to the FJ.
Yeah, that's right. To Rex's car. And then there was the bronzy coloured 37 Chev that went over to Sacramento and done Grand National Show, and that car won like 6 or 7 awards at those shows. So
So it's pushing us to make sure that we present well.
Yeah.
So if we go away from those 4 shows and then look at things like the hot rod shows, so they're judged on their own system.
They are.
Have you had any involvement in that, in similarity to what you guys do?
Not really, and I actually don't really have an issue with the way anybody wants to judge their show. I personally, that's based off a so-called tick sheet where you're looking at, has it got this, all this criteria, meet all this criteria? That's fine. What we really, really push for in our system is, why we have the builders judging the cars is because we want to actually include the passion, and it's really hard to judge that as such. But if you've got a guy, if you've got the best trimmer or the best painter or one of the best engine builder or performance guy or suspension guy, if they're judging on your team and they're doing it every day, they know exactly what they're looking for. Yeah. So that's what's really important to me on the team.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, though, I look at it as a builder, that if I'm going to take, when I used to take my cars to all the shows, I was well aware that when I went to the hot rod show, it was going to be judged by the hot rod guys.
Yep.
And one of the biggest things that I learned really early on was I needed to get in, make sure I got access to them to tell them what was done to the car.
Correct.
Because they were in love with a 33 Ford.
Yes.
And I'm presenting them with an XA.
XA Falcon, yeah.
And they didn't, they would rightfully not know what changes were made or how things were done. And it was to a point at one stage, I can remember when I had the Blue Falcon, Rock 3, I was going to do, put it on show and then put a bit of cotton from the modification out to the ground with a note.
This is
and
what
have it displayed like
mate, it would look like a porcupine.
Right, so that you achieved the points you thought you deserved.
Yeah.
Because they weren't aware. So I didn't do that. I ended up talking. And it was funny because back then, most of those shows, they used to have a caravan in the corner of the hall.
Correct.
And that's where they do their tally, because it was all manual. And I'd go in and they always had the opportunity, if you wanted to find out how you went, they would sit you down with your judging sheet.
Yeah.
And go through it with you and tell you what. They wouldn't show you anyone else's.
Yeah.
But on one occasion I said to them, well, what do I got to do? And they said, well, you need to go and look at, that certain red car over there and have a look at his front end and have a look at yours, and you make up your mind what you think, why he's doing better than you. And that's when I had everything painted, and that was all chrome.
Yeah.
So I went home and took it out, got the whole lot chromed, put it in, and then 4 years later when I rebuilt it, I painted it all again because they'd finally caught up.
Well, guess what's harder to do? Prep that and paint it, then send it off to a chromer. Yeah.
But at that point in time, the hot rod style, I guess, was all about chrome.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, we're talking early 80s.
Yeah. But see, that's what I'm talking about, the passion and people doing it, because what our system does, it rewards innovation for one, but quality, amount of work done, but quality. Quality will always win out in the end.
Yeah.
But if you think about what you should be rewarded for if you're building a car, is amount of work done.
So can you expand on innovation for me? Because I've heard the word so many times.
Yes.
So is that change for change's sake?
No.
Or is it... Explain to me innovation, because I've always struggled a bit with it, to understand what you're looking for in the terms of innovation.
Well, look, that is really difficult, because that will be in the eye of the person judging that car. But realistically, you're looking for something that's been done on that vehicle that maybe hasn't been done before, or you've done better than what it's been done before. That's a really basic view of it. But you've got a lot of innovation in the last car you built, for instance. Like, though that's been done, I've seen Commodore body, or an EH on a Commodore platform, but it wasn't particularly done that well. Where what you've done is you've grafted that car. It almost looks like it's come out of the factory like that. So therefore, I'd call that very innovative.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got something, a shape that a lot of people like. It's a 70s shape, but it's a car you can get in, you can run unleaded fuel, everything you can do that in a modern car.
And that came about by accident. But
don't say that. We're talking about good planning here.
We are. But I mean, when I say accident, because the car was never built around the judging sheet, which other cars I've built have. This car came to me with the running gear and all, so all of those sorts of things was the owner's ideas. And we sort of tripped over putting the whole FG thing in it midstream, because he'd always wanted the late model seats and console and stuff, and when it came to me, it had a steel dash in it that was sort of a bit of a copy of the XC, and it didn't work. And I just said to him, like, make up your mind what you want here.
Yes.
And we started putting a floor in it, and then he said, well, can we do the dash as well? And I'm like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
I said, well, if we do the dash to make the cluster work, and we already knew we were going to run the gearbox, we need a whole car to go in it.
Yeah.
And once again, my aim then was to make it appear as though, Ford did it, not...
Yeah. So I'd call that innovation. And just to expand a little bit more on that, I'm thinking of what a lot of people are doing now are looking for the big progression in our industry, I'll call it at the moment, is interiors. That's the thing that has jumped. Because I guess body and paint you can only do so much.
Yes.
And to get it, you're looking for perfection and whatever. Where interiors, what I really noticed at Summernats, and what I'm looking at now is dashes, but seats. People are looking at Audi seats, Rolls-Royce seats, Bentley seats, and with the seat belts obviously in the seat and all that type of thing. So that's, even though that's not innovative for the OEMs, it's innovative for our industry.
Yeah. Because I remember I talked to John Aristis about when we were involved with Tailspin, and from a judging perspective with that car is the fact that from a body and paint point of view, there were so many modifications. Yeah. And I think we did a reasonable job of where we got to with it, where you get to that quality, because you can have a million modifications, but if the finish is not there.
That's right.
And whether you like the car or not, the reality is when you guys are judging it, there's no section that says, do I like the car? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that's really important. And I still get, there's not an event I don't go to, I had a lot of trouble doing this. I'm going, so did that guy. So did that guy. They think they're the only person that's ever had an issue with that or that or that. That's a build. That's what a car build is. There'll always be something going on. Always something.
You're not judging the person. You're not judging what happened on the way. None of that. You are really only judging what's in front of you. And I, over the years, the young judges I've brought through it, so I've just absolutely stressed that to them so much that even if you don't like the person or you don't like the car, it doesn't matter. You're looking at that. If you're doing the interior, you're judging that interior. It sounds a bit crazy. You mightn't even know what car that is, but if you're judging that interior, you're judging that interior.
So if we look at some specifics, Owen, like body. Now, my understanding is body is not just panel work.
Correct.
It's glass.
Yep.
Bumpers,
moulds.
So anything on the
body.
On the body.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people lose track of that because we've covered everything we've done in a fair bit of detail with Boss XC, and people go, how did it not win body? They're going, well, first of all, do you understand it's glass, it's bumpers, and it's all of those things that make up the external of the car. And when we were doing Tailspin, knowing that we were striving to be Grandmaster, things like the headlights were copper plated, then refitted, then the car was painted, and then they were sanded, and all of those process on that one item is probably fivefold because you're striving for that, because it's part of body.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't understand. They just think body is right. I mean, the car can look really good and have a couple of little waves in the body, but if everything else is perfect, and there's another car where the body looks absolutely mint, but the glass is second hand and full of scratches.
Or they've used an original style rubber. It's all wonky on the corners. The lock and strip doesn't fit. So then what's happened over the last 15 years is they've cut that frame out, made that and put just urethane the glass in, and then urethane around that. That was okay. It looked a lot neater. But if you even have a look, innovation keeps going back in my head. You've asked that, but this was innovation when I looked at this car. And I don't really want to drill down on specific cars, but the Statesman at Summernats this year was, if you looked at that car, he actually had the glass fitting perfectly. Then they made a one-piece mould all the way around.
Yeah, someone mentioned to me it's one-piece mould.
Unbelievable. Like that was unbelievable. So that's all part of the body.
Yep.
Yeah, and people go, how, or didn't really say how that car win, but that's just another plus
one of those things
for that car.
Yeah.
The bumper bars. I reckon, looking at the bumper bars on that car, I reckon they probably spent a week making them fit. They were just perfect.
I would say probably more.
2 weeks,
The rear bumper on Boss XC has been cut and sharp for appearance, but also rotated so it looks better, but then all remade. And the reason it's painted is that there's no way it'd take another 3 weeks to get it to a point where you could plate it.
Where you chrome it, exactly.
But I mean, that's the things that people need to understand, that if you go and buy a repo bumper and put it on and it looks fine and you gap it up, and then the other car has got a fully modified bumper, from a judging perspective,
more work, amount of work done.
More work, more hours,
more innovation,
and finished properly, and the innovation.
Yeah.
So you talked about trim, and I'm seeing, you know, all of this computerised stuff.
Yes. I was going to go into again with the innovation is the whole 3D printing thing, which is probably more, obviously a bit on the outside parts and engine parts and that, but it's really taken off.
Taken off in the trim.
And I mean, interior, yeah.
I would think, you know, trim used to be, I don't know, 10 or 15% of a build budget.
Yeah.
And it's now going up because the hours involved.
We're looking now at $80 to $100,000 interiors now.
Minimum, I would have thought.
Yeah. Which is quite a jump. That's why I made that point, because that's where there's been more, I guess, progression, innovation in that part of the builds.
Yeah. So I mean, we well and truly under budget once we went to what we did and what Simon was able to do, and the bugbear was actually the door trims.
Yes.
Because he ended up pretty much fabbing them from scratch. And to get them to fit the car and then clear everything, and it's quite mind-boggling to...
Yeah.
And then to get it...
I think they were actually made in 2 or 3 pieces, weren't they?
Probably more.
Yeah, to make it fit. Yeah.
So it's a difficult process, and part of that, and something else I wanted to sort of drill down on a bit, was the fact that I've done it for a long time now, and I know with your paint, you always talk about not just judging the finish you're seeing, but also, you know, whether the primers are done properly and all those
down
sort
to
of
the primer,
things.
you can see that.
How do you determine that if the car just turns up and you're looking at it?
Well, that is a good point, and I was actually going to touch on this earlier. I do feel really fortunate, but I actually think I've got a really important role at the moment, because I'm getting around to see the majority of what I'd say really good cars. Not every car, you just can't do it, but of all the really good cars in the build. So I'm getting the chance to take a lot of photos. So I see, but a lot of photos for the judges of those cars, and I'll show them how much work is in that body, or how much is in that trim, or what they're doing in that engine bay. And Rachel also, who works full-time for Summernats, and she's a body and paint judge, she's working full-time for them, and so she gets to call and see a lot of builders as well. So that's really important, that you are getting to see a lot of these cars in the build, and we're happy for people to send us
I was just going to
photos
say,
as well.
I mean, the difficulty is, unfortunately, we're going to put this out in the world so people will you know, maybe hear about it. So the opportunity, realistically, someone that's building an elite car that's even looking top 60 needs to get in contact with the office and have a talk to them at Summernats.
Definitely going to be their advantage.
Or Summernats Motorex. Because something I've done in the past, as you'd be well aware, is I'd seen, I think, the 34, I think it was, Raw.
Yeah, Mick for Bars.
Mick probably did the first build book.
Yes.
That was on the stand of the glossy photos.
Yes.
And I'd seen the build books come out of Trepania's workshop
and that's where the idea came from.
A long way back. But then I took that one step further, where then I went to the process of actually creating a small A4 book for each section of the car.
Yes.
And presented those to the judges when I did the Mustang.
Yes.
So this is Summernats 21. And it was a black and white, mainly very dot point information, but also photos of the process. And then an overall of that, and you were the head judge then, and I gave you a copy. And everyone's trying to give them back, and I said, no, they're yours to take away, because to turn up to an event like that with a car that before all of this stuff, YouTube and Facebook was around, to bring a brand new car in, the judges needed a better awareness of what you've done and the process you've done, especially if that car was fully engineered.
Yeah.
So all I'd say, if you're trying to do well, you need to be able to inform the judges. So that was something I did way back then. Is that still relevant today?
It is, but let me just, I'll drill down on that a little bit, because with Superstars, what I actually get people to do is send in their information probably a month or 2 months before, and then I give a copy to all the judges so they get time to go through that. Because at an event, you think about if they've got to go through all those cars, there's 2 things going on. They really don't get the time to read that in depth. Yep. And secondly, do they get time to really absorb it? Because you think if they've looked at that one and that one and that one, which car was I reading about? Yeah. So I liked it, but with my role now, I get to see a lot of those cars. So I'm already across. I would like to think every one of those cars, especially in Superstars, come to Motorex, and I've been drilling down on those for the last month.
Yep.
Now that's only me, and if I'm not judging, but what I've already sent information out to the judges on a lot of those vehicles, but also they've got to judge them at other events as well, so they do know them. But if I'm looking at other newer cars in the build, but more importantly, I'll have a look, not as not overseeing them like whipping them there at the event, but I'll in my head I'll have a pretty good idea of who should be winning or who's going to be competing for paint. There'll be 2 or 3. There'll be another different 2 for interior.
Yep.
So I'll be looking at that, and then I'll go up to Drago or Rachel or whoever and say, well, you know, what about that car? Oh no, we didn't get it for this reason.
I think you've sort of made me think of something else.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've sat around at Summernats. You know, I class Building B as my building. I've been hanging out and living there. And you know,
it's really mine.
I used to camp outside under the trees and all that sort of stuff. And we've had a marquee, and fortunately nowadays PPG are out the front, and I hang out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where I've sort of lived for 30 odd years, and I've lost my train of thought now. But no, I've lost it.
Yeah, no, I was talking about how those people come to me, and I can look at all those different parts of cars, and then I'll have an expectation of who'll be doing well in body, or who'll be doing well in interior, who'll be doing.
Okay,
yeah.
so you used to have little grandstands.
Yes.
And the cars would come through, and the judges would judge all the cars. And I've heard it so many times. I sat in the stands for 2 hours, and I watched the paint judges, and they don't even look at the cars.
Correct. It's
and
a very common.
And as a painter, and you know, we've worked together on a car, I say to those guys, I'll guarantee you, if I walked you out there and you stood there, as that car drives up, you would know before it stops whether it's worthy.
I know it sounds very harsh, but I don't really say this comment very often, but now you're going to force me to say this on air here. But it sounds really harsh, but you will know, out of, just say Summernats, for instance, we'll judge 500, 600 cars. It'll really only come down to about 10 cars that compete at that top level. And it's not, there'll be 200 cars with awesome paint jobs, but when it comes to inside the door jams, in behind the gutter, look under the sill, it just eliminates so many cars.
And I think,
because they're the hard bits.
I'm going to say, and I always say to people, they all look good. The big flat surfaces on every car looks good. And I've talked about it on the channel, and I'm more than comfortable talking about it here. It's even like we all cut and polish, but then people get scared of the edges, and they've still got orange peel on the edges.
100%.
Or the very end of the panel is still peely.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm sure you've seen some paint jobs where you go, wow, how did they ever get that back to being shiny, because they lay so much product on it, and it's all full of peel and dry and horrible, and they chop the hell out of it.
Yeah.
But that still shows once it's cut. And you and I can walk up to a car, and I have people say to me, can you walk me around and show me why a car wins whatever? And I go, sure. Because once I've done this with you, you will never look at a car the same again.
I know. I go to an event and I just wish sometimes I could have a look at it, but I'm judging that car without me even knowing it. And
we do.
I don't mean to be like that. It sounds
exactly right.
Really
and
harsh,
I mean, Mark Arblast is a good example, where Mark's written for Street Machine forever. He's had some wonderful cars, but primarily tough street cars.
Yeah.
When we did War 440 in the purple version, I walked him around Motorex and showed him what he needed to do, because he was looking to do tough street Summernats, and then he ended up putting it in Street Elite. And when I walked him around, and he said to me a few months later, he said, I'm done. He said, I go to an event now, and what used to be a really cool car, I walk up to it and go, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. So it is a different feeling.
It is.
And I, you know, my saying for a very, very long time is, you know, aim for success, not perfection.
Yeah.
Because nothing's perfect.
No, I've never judged a perfect car.
No, and they never will.
No.
Because we're all human, and we're all trying to do what we do.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, and I mean, we did it very much with Boss XC, and I did a video, I don't know if you've seen it, where I actually went through and picked out all the things that I would think the judges would have
and
seen.
I heard more comment about that video. Howard's picking his own work. What's going on there?
Because you've got to be realistic.
You've got to be realistic and honest with yourself.
And you've got to look at it and say, well, okay, if I place where I did with all these things wrong with it, there's room to move.
Yeah, 100%.
But if you've done everything possible,
Yeah.
and you turn up and you don't do well. And that leads me into another thing that I had in my head now, and you've obviously seen a lot of good shops build a lot of cars. What's the difference why some shops seem to do really well in judging and others not so much? Even though if they're in Street Machine magazine, or they're, Joe Bloggs walks past and goes, "Oh, both beautiful cars," there's always something about some of the shops, and let's not talk about which ones, but there are some people that seem to score better.
That is very simple. It's just finish and quality. It's just quality. They will spend more time. They'll cut and buff those areas we're talking about under the sill.
So it's the
little things.
Yeah.
And I cannot ever stress enough to anybody that comes and questions. And I love talking to people, and if they, not so much that they don't win, but where they can improve their car. I'm actually going to look at a car. It was at Summernats, and he's just sort of lost his way a little bit, and I'm more than happy to go and have a chat with him. So I'm going to do that. But when you explain that to them and explain it to them in a proper manner, they don't. Most people want to hear it. There's a few don't really want to hear it.
I've got a standard saying. When someone says to me, "Will you have a look at my car for me?"
Yeah.
And I go, "Well, okay, I will, but I've got 3 or 4 versions. I can walk up to your car and say, that's a nice car.
That's really nice, yeah.
I can walk up to your car and give you what I class as the 10 to 20 metre look.
Yeah.
And go, yeah, that's nice, but you probably could fix that or that. Or I can actually go over it and show you the big items that I think you can fix now that will achieve points. Or the last one, which is the one that hurts.
Tear it down and start again.
As I'll go over it and I'll show you all the things that I think is costing you points.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the majority of them you can't fix because it's either bodywork or paintwork.
I call them inbuilt. They're inbuilt.
They're inbuilt problems.
Yeah.
And I've done that on numerous occasions. I'm sure you have. And I know we both looked at the same car not that long ago, before Summernats. And there's a video that I've got up on that was before Summernats 2 years ago. The VL that won People's Choice 2 years ago. It's a local car in Wollongong. And I'm a friend of the father of that car. And he rang me about trying to get something polished, a couple of weeks out. And I went over and had a look at it for him. I said, look, I didn't know you were doing that. And their aim was to try and make top 60. And I went over and had a look at the car, and I really suggested they go to Tough Street. It's where I thought the car belonged. But they want to be in the hall.
Yep.
So I went over it with them, and I picked all the things I thought they could fix in 2 weeks. and some of that was really basic. And it's a driven car.
Yeah.
And I've seen you guys do it forever, but I said to them, when the judges walk up to your car, they're going to run their fingers along your wheel arches and behind your bumpers. And if anything comes out, Summernats is a little bit different because it's not super clean, but we all know the difference between what was last week's burnout and what was that Summernats.
Correct.
And all of the things I explained to them, they said to me afterwards, they said, everything you told us happened. I said, well, I know, I've been doing it 35, 40 years. Exactly. Of course it's going to happen. But they're the things that people don't understand. The judges have been doing this forever.
Yeah.
And they have a system.
Yeah.
You need to watch the judges judge. You need to understand and study the system before you start building the car.
Yeah, 100%. And we're totally transparent about that. I remember the first time, and I think it was Mick with Raw. Somebody said to me, they're videoing you guys. And I said, that's fine. I said, we're not doing anything that's not transparent.
Yep.
But they were smart enough to sit up there and video and see where the judges stopped, what they were looking at. They call somebody over and have a look at that.
Yep.
That's just smart.
Yep.
And it interesting you said there. It seemed like a bit of black magic that, but I'm absolutely opposite. I actually want to make it totally transparent because there is, just to prove that there's no favouritism, and that's why I was absolutely rapt this year when that Porsche won. And the reason being, it just proved to me as a person involved with all these events that if you build a really good car that's like just great finish everywhere, great engineering, but then you can drive it as well. You can come to any of our events and you can win that event.
Yeah.
I just think that's awesome. It doesn't matter. It shows there's no favouritism.
And in fact, I was a little bit surprised it didn't do better in some of the categories because when I filmed that in our top 60 video, you know, the bodywork and the paintwork and the finish is everywhere I look on that car. The wheel treatment.
And you know what that was? And you know why? It was probably 1 or 2 points over 1,000, and it was just degree of difficulty or a bit more work done on the other cars. If you looked at the cars, and I'm not even sure what they were, but if you look at what they would have been a bigger car, more customising. The colour might have been a candy. That's a solid grey. So that was all. It wasn't because it wasn't good.
Yeah,
it was just purely more work done. Which, to me, if I'm building a car, I want to be rewarded if I do more work.
I was just going to say, and that comes back to that whole thing. If you're looking at building a show car, you need to build a show car.
A lot of modifications, candy.
People used to say to me, you know, why would you paint your car pink? And of course, it was never pink; it was violet. But
of course,
when I built Rock 3 and when I did the Fairlane in that colour and the wheel combination on that, I never planned to drive it on the street.
No,
I built a show car.
You knew what you wanted.
And I needed to drive in that hall and have the judges go, "Well, what's he done now?"
Yeah.
And incite the judges to want to get over and judge the car.
Yeah.
And then that progressed into the Pioneer and the Flag and, you know, that whole thing.
Yeah.
But then, having said that, when I built the Mustang, I built that for me, and it was another red Mustang.
Yeah.
But what I did do was, because it was my own car, and I wasn't, no time frames, I wasn't rushing for sponsors and all that sort of stuff. It was built over 3 or 4 years. All those little things were done, and it made it as a top 10 car, and it won paint, I think, a couple of times. But
which was probably a bigger achievement than not anything that you've done, but it was a big achievement because you actually built a car that you, and I was going to make this point, that you actually wanted, but then you wanted to drive it to the events, you wanted that, but you still made top 10. Like, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
And it was interesting with that car. For instance, the coilover shocks were out of the box, they weren't polished, they were clean, and they still had the Coney labels on them, and the brakes were out of the box as well. But everything that attached them and was made properly, and either anodised or painted or powder coated or whatever. And I always say to people, if you make every component on your car the best you can possibly make that component, it will be a really good car.
Yeah.
And you need to drill all the way down to every little nut, bolt, bracket on that car. And if all of those things are done to the best of your ability, that's the best car you can build.
Yeah.
And that car will always be very successful, regardless of whether it's a street car.
Yep. That is so true.
Class at Summernats or in elite.
Yep. And that's, I'll make 2 points here, and one in particular is that people go to, and not so much the builder, this will usually be observations from outside. I know that guy spent $600,000 on that car and he didn't win anything. Money, I won't say it doesn't come into it, but it never comes into the judging. But if you spend more money, well, you'd like to think you're going to get a better job or better parts or whatever. But it's really not about that. It is always about the execution, and as I've said previously, about the quality. So if you've got somebody that, and I didn't want to single out a lot of cars, but Aaron Fitzpatrick's Datsun back in the day was a really good example. I think that car was well under $100,000, and look at what that car achieved. That's because they just did everything themselves.
I think the other part of that is the fact that if you look at cars that are built, chassis here, body there, paint there, trimmer there, and no one's managing
they don't flow.
You end up with a car with a really expensive paint job, a really expensive interior, but
it doesn't flow.
And more often than not, what happens is when the trimmer gets it, the brackets aren't in to hold the things, and it's just
so normal.
And it starts to show when it finally gets finished. It never looks finished.
It never looks finished.
And someone spent a bucket of money in it, and it's really about having a project manager that manages that if you build it that way, or that's got to go to a shop where someone's capable of managing that for you. You know, like the bigger builds that I've built recently, you know, in the last 10 years have gone to PPG to be painted, but I'm there every waking moment.
You're managing it.
To make sure that all of those things, you know, you got to let them have a bit of leeway, but at the same token, you can't do that because...
I bet you're managing that trimmer as well, even though you're not trimming it, because you've picked out who you want to trim it, but you're managing it. You're not telling him how to do it, but you're managing it. Yeah. So that
you know
car
me fairly
flows.
well, so I probably was telling you.
Yeah, you probably were.
But it's about Simon made the comment. It's so nice that I'll grind a bit off because we're fitting up stuff before the paint. Where most of the cars they get, the car's already painted, and then they go to fit something and it's you need 2 mil, or there ain't no 2 mil because it's already got paint on it.
Yeah.
So it does make a difference to get the flow.
And that's really important because even though you don't judge that car, like we're saying, we don't judge that car because you like an XW Falcon or a VL Commodore or whatever you like, but it's the car, when you're looking back at it, it's got to have a good stance and it's got to flow. Yeah, and if a car doesn't flow, you pick that up straight away. If it's the wrong wheels for the build, if it's the, not so much the wrong colour, but the wrong stance, the wrong wheels, whatever, it just doesn't flow.
There's sort of there's no box to tick for that. You guys,
but that's why I talk about
passion.
Having the right people, experience and passion. Yeah, and that's definitely what we have. And we're always on the lookout for that. Over the last couple of years, I reckon I've had 4 or 5 new guys come in, or new guys and girls, and we stick them with we call it shadow judging. So they'll just do an event with them, and it's really interesting. A lot of people think they want to judge, and then they get to the end of especially a Summernats, and you just get hammered at Summernats. Like they just work around the clock, and that's why they hate people just get on social media and talk. They don't even know what they're talking about. So that really. And
obviously, I've watched from the outside, and I know a lot of you guys personally do well. And people have said to me, "Oh, they're all stick together." Well, if you don't stick together and go to dinner together, everywhere you go, you're going to get hammered by someone.
But that's all talking about the.
But I mean, outside
the group as well.
But when you're finished,
right,
and then you go and have dinner somewhere.
You get nailed.
I mean, if you actually just had an open thing, we're going to be here, come and talk to us. You're just going to get this thing, and I sort of feel for that whole process.
Yeah.
I've just about covered all of the things I wanted to talk about, except there's one thing I noticed here I didn't cover, and that was your experience overseas. So I believe you've judged even at the Riddler?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to know the guys that run the Detroit Autorama, and I actually sat in on 2 judging meetings there, and even went out on the floor with them. So that was a really interesting process, because that was after I'd met Troy Trepanier, and he said that, and I got him to sit in on one of our judging meetings and what we do, and he said, man, he said, this is just unbelievable. He said, you've got the guys that are building these cars. He said, I wish we had this system in the US. And I thought, that's a really strange comment. He's just patronising me or whatever. And then I got to talk to him a lot about it. He said, come and have a look at some of the stuff we've done. And look, at the end of the day, I don't knock anybody's judging system, but I really love ours because it's the passion, the experience, and I just think we have the right idea. Do we get it right all the time? No. Or do people agree with it? Absolutely not. But what I hope at the end of the day, they respect that decision. And the other thing I really want to make a point, the only problem with doing it there's so few really good tradesmen that are prepared to step up and judge. Judges can't judge their own work, so I've got to have a pool.
Two of everything.
Yeah, but I've also got to have a pool that if, like, say I've got I look at it, the event come up at Motorex, right? Yeah. So I've looked at that, and if I've got the painter, he might have painted 5 or 6 cars. I say, look, you can't judge at this event. It's just too many. If there's one, just step away and that. But at the end, so that's really important. But it's worth putting up with that little bit of criticism, because the people that don't know say, his car only won because he was involved with the judging team. Well, I think it works the other way. I think when people look at that, if he will have no input into that judging, but I think the other people are even more harsh, critical on him. He should have known better than that. He's here judging with us.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not even fair.
We had that circumstance, and I think, you read a lot on social media, and people say, you shouldn't have, this judge shouldn't be involved. And I mean, we won trim, and Simon was the trimmer, and he was judging this year. But all the discussions I had was with the other trim judge. 100%. And I don't know the guy at all.
And I can guarantee you he had no involvement with that.
So when you're at the coalface, you're aware of all of that, but it's hard for people looking from the outside.
Perception. I call it perception.
Especially when one of their mates or a family member has just dropped a whole lot of money and didn't achieve any of the goals that they were trying to achieve.
Correct.
So I see that as a difficult thing, but I really wanted to make sure that people are aware that there's people in the system that, like yourself, that have seen the other systems and the way it works. And I mean, I've been involved where when Ronnie Barclay and I, when he had his ute and I had the Fairlane and we were doing the shows, we'd both stand there. And I remember I tried to have a bet with him one time up at the Brisbane Hot Rod Show. I said, I don't know who's going to win this one because we're at a hot rod show.
Yeah,
and totally different cars.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'll go your halves. It was $500 for top street machine. I said, I'll go your halves. And nah, what he goes, I'll go, all right, no worries. And I ended up winning. But that was the point we were at.
Yeah.
Because we'd already done 3 shows and I think we'd shared to that point. So it was almost to do with the system and the judges on the day who would win, because the cars were totally different cars.
Yeah.
One was almost stock, but highly detailed.
I hope we've taken that out of the equation. That was my big goal.
The point I made within your events, maybe so.
Yeah. Yes. But that's what I meant within our events.
But if I then take the car to
to Elvis's show,
to the Melbourne show,
because Ronnie Barclay now judging there, and he is hard.
Right. So no matter where you go, you go to the Brisbane Hot Rod Show, and it's under the hot rod system.
Yeah.
Right? And then there was the Maskell was also working with a few others to come up, and they were shadow judging at the hot rod show. So there's a lot of people had a look and worked out, how they would go about it, and I think that's all valuable.
It is valuable,
But people need to understand, and I say to people, if you want to win, if you want to make top 60, is not too difficult if you're going to build a decent car.
Correct.
Top 10 is a lot harder.
Yep.
Top judged is really hard.
Yep.
But if you take that top judged car from Summernats and take it to Motorex, it's a different system. So if you don't understand what you're doing, and then you can take it to the hot rod show and all of a sudden be down the list and go, what happened there?
Yeah.
It's about understanding
different systems.
Whether you're building a Grand Champion car, a top judged car, whether it's fully engineered. I mean, it used to be, we used to have to drive the car in the hall and you had to prove registration.
Yeah.
Now, half the top 60 are already in there because they're unveiled cars, so they're not driven at all. They don't even need to run.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no requirement to show registration papers or proof of rego or an engineer's report. So a lot of those things have changed, and I've had the discussion with you as well where, cars built as burnout cars have been winning awards in the Elite Hall when they clearly could never be registered. So, I mean, you just got to understand that the sport changes and it moves.
I'll ask you this question. Do you think that's a good thing? I would imagine, because if we were just staying the same as we were back in 1980 or not, we wouldn't have some of the great cars we have. So I think that
for me,
the industry should move.
I think there needs to be a line in the sand that says the car should be seen to be registrable.
Well, just to interrupt you there for a minute, we do have that at Motorex at Street Elite. You have to present your rego papers.
But I don't think we should get to a point where we were building cars, the little Gemini, that I actually seen at the Hot Rod Show last year, and man, that was an incredible build. But no exhaust, no windows, plastic seats.
Never be able to register.
It's a piece of art.
Yeah, that's what it is, piece of art.
But I personally think the cars that we're building in Elite still should be registrable cars. Yeah, that's my belief. Obviously, you have a different point.
Yeah, because that's why we have Street Elite now.
I just think it needs to be clear.
Yeah,
clearer than it is at the moment.
Yeah, okay.
What the actual rules are for someone to win Grandmaster in relation to whether the vehicle is what I class as an event car. So, all these guys building the blown injected things to go out and run around at power crews, no back brakes, monster motors.
But they're not going to win Motorex.
No, but they can win coupe or
or engine.
And I don't think they should.
Yeah, okay.
There's a competition class for them. If you're going to build a burnout car, go down the burnout track, put it into tough street. If you want to go in the hall, there's a class for you, and it's called exhibition or competition.
Or competition, yeah. Yeah.
And those cars, if you're gonna, you can't be all things to all people.
No, that's for sure. I've learnt that over the years.
And I had a good lengthy meeting with Mark Hayes when he built his last Tirana.
Yeah.
Because he was looking to try to achieve
Everything.
a lot of things with the one car.
Yeah, yeah.
And he came to me.
But knowing him, he really wanted to be a good race car.
Right.
Yes.
But the issues for him were to put really good paint on it.
Yeah.
It's going to weigh too much.
Yeah.
The product.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it all, every tin weighs.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding what your goals are and prioritising those.
Yeah.
And I think if you're building a burnout car and you want to win elite trophies, build an elite car and then try and do burnouts. Don't do it the other way around. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I know you've got reasons why
no.
they should be in, but I don't think they should be.
Yeah, no, and I actually take everything on board, and we are willing to change things all the time, not for the sake of change.
Yeah, as long as we know,
and then obviously then promote.
If someone's going to plan a build for 3 years,
yeah,
right?
They need to know what they're planning to build too. Yeah.
So while I got you under the grill,
yes.
So the Unveiled cars, I have some concerns with top 60 because top 60 means a lot to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
That we're automatically giving Unveiled cars a top 60 spot, and I don't think some of them are worthy.
So what do you want me to say to that?
Well, I'm wondering what the criteria is, because to run for Grand Champion you need to be in the top 60.
Yes.
So if I build a car that's Unveiled, that doesn't necessarily fit all the criteria of an elite car, and it might be borderline in being able to win what it should do, enough points to get into the hall in its own right, but it's automatically in there as an Unveiled. I'm wondering whether you have a system, which I would think you would, but I'm trying to work out the fact that people striving for top 60, this year there was only 32 spots left, because I think you had 28 Unveils.
We did, but if you spend a bit of time and walk around there, I actually had 80 cars in there.
Okay.
So I still did have a top 60, or we had.
I think people need to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah. No, that's good.
And I think that if,
like I said, I want to be transparent on all those things.
If a car is Unveiled, it shouldn't be an automatic.
It's not
Grand Champion.
No, and it's not
contender.
And that's probably never been. So like that. I know that's not written anywhere. So people don't know that. So
I think it needs to be, because if someone builds a car and it's really cool and it gets Unveiled, I'm cool with that, provided it doesn't take someone else's top 60 spot.
Yeah. And
it's not allowed to run for Grand Champion if it hasn't achieved the points required to make the 60.
Yeah. And just thinking straight off the top of my head, I don't think that has happened, but you're right. But
I'm looking from the outside
and
listening to what people are saying.
Absolutely. And that's important.
Because the car I talked about earlier with Ben with the XY.
Yes.
His goal, a 25-year build, his goal was top 60.
And he made the top 60.
And when I looked at the car, you know what I told him to do? Paint the undercarriage back and go out and win streets. Because it was an awesome built, drivable car.
100%.
Right? But that's not his goal. My concern
and it fitted in the wrong category, really.
My concern is taking spots away from that guy with an Unveil.
Yeah.
If it's not worthy.
No, well,
but if you've got 80 in there, I can live with that.
Yes.
And provided something's not Unveiled, that shouldn't get the opportunity to do driving.
Yeah. And you're right, but it hasn't been communicated. So probably need to go away now. You give me more work to do. Good on you.
That's all right.
We do have a genuine top 60. Yeah. We definitely do.
So to try and round it out.
Just to finish on that, because I actually didn't realise when we first started this was a vision of mine that I put to check about this top 60 show, because if you remember back in the day, people just drove around and they really didn't have. We're starting to get some really good cars and they had nowhere to really put them. Well, so that's how that show started.
I always tell people so 86 it was called the top 70 and we were in what's now the dyno cell.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even know I'd made it, and someone found me and said you're meant to be in the hall.
Yeah.
So the Summernats then, when that was started, you got notified on the wall like at 4 in the afternoon. You had to be set up by 6, and then you had to move it out at 11.
Yeah.
On Friday night.
Yeah.
11 o'clock.
Yes.
All of these top cars drove out of the building B and went somewhere.
Yeah.
And then it's progressed now.
Yeah.
And I like what you've done this year, like
Yeah.
one just passed.
Yeah.
Because I think it helps to grow our side of the sport.
Yeah,
Because otherwise
100%.
the cars aren't. If someone goes Friday, they don't see the cars.
Yes.
Well, now they do.
Yeah.
But it has evolved, and I think in the right direction. But I just want to make sure we don't lose track of people's vision over a long period of time building a car for a goal that can be shortcutted by somebody.
Yes, and that was what I was getting to, that I actually didn't realise when we first had this vision for this show how important it is for the people to make that top 60. It's almost become as important as the top 10 or top 20.
Well, it's like I said,
so many people say to me, all I want to do is make the top 60.
It's like I said about the guys with the VL. The previous year.
Yeah, that's what they want to do.
That's what they want to do, and for a lot of them, they don't understand. And I'd hopefully, with what we've done today, is that they check out the Summernats site, check out the Motorex site. You've got to drill down into the entrance side of a bit, but there is a participation guide that actually gives you what the judges are looking for.
Which I've, in my new role with them, have been going through cleaning up all those participation
I noticed
guides.
it's changed. I've
with
had a look the other day.
Rockynats, Red Centre, with all of them, and that we're working through it all. And obviously Summernats is the biggest one, but hopefully in the next time this, or probably next month, we'll have all that information out there, very transparent.
Well, this is going up Thursday. So
maybe a month, 6 weeks.
So, I mean, I think we've covered most of the things that I wanted to talk about, Owen, in relation to, and we might get back together and have a chat a bit more about some specifics about what we're talking about, because I think it's important for people to understand, especially in paint and body, where the points go, and I can put some photos together because I think it works pretty
something
well.
You touched on there earlier is people would just laugh at the fact that you say, well, I can judge that the primer, how well that was put on, and I know that sounds a bit crazy because you've got paint on top of it and clear and then it's cut and buff, but if that primer is not been sanded properly or whatever on there, you can actually see through that paint, and what I call it like cellulite, you'll see that just wasn't sanded properly. There's a whole lot of things.
The biggest
there.
one to me is, and I spoke about it with the video we did with John when we painted this one, is John's a lover of the machine.
Yes.
Before, so final primer before the base coat goes on.
Yeah.
You know, any of those straight cuts with paper that everyone wants to sand by, wet sand and all that sort of stuff. The machine is so fine, if you run 800 over it, the chance of that coming through the base coat on a silver, for instance, disappears.
Yes.
And I mean, I understand you can see those sorts of things, but I mean, I'm trying to view it from a layman reading the sheet going, we judge the primer, the this, or that, and I'm reading it and going, yeah, right.
Yeah.
How does that work, you know? So,
but it's more in the overall finish of that vehicle, and while you're touching on body and paint, just such a big, not issue, but a big thing in that industry is the whole blocking thing now.
Yeah.
From splines to the linear blocks to all these different things, and so it's probably an interesting thing to drill down on a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, I did do a bit of that on this one. I listened to a motivational guy from the 80s and 90s that I used to listen to when I was a young bloke, and I've been listening to that when I've been exercising, and he made a comment about, don't get stuck in the past, blah, 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 and I've used the same process forever, and I actually bought some, the colour sanding blocks.
Which one? Which?
I bought some
not
big
splines,
boys.
but
Well, they're splines, but they're for the colour sanding process.
Yep.
So Melomotives and big boys blocks, and fiddled with them, and I think they're better. And there's still some of my old things that I do, I think, still work, because I wasn't trained in the panel shop side of things. I think quite a lot of things different that I've evolved in what I do.
Yeah.
But I think that's for another time. We probably should sit down and have a talk about that.
Yeah.
Look, Alan, thanks very much. And I think from this we'll probably get a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I'll answer
Have to
those.
revisit it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but I'll just make one point there, and we've talked a lot about planning your build, what you're actually going for, but my advice is still, if you're going to spend the money or you want, build the car you want. Sure, have a look at, think about where you want to go, what you're trying to build, but still build the car you want, because believe me, when you're driving that car on a nice sunny day to a Cars and Coffee or down to an event, the best trophy you can ever have is that car you're driving.
It is, provided...
I said to a trophy hunter here.
provided, and you were there, I judged at Extreme in Adelaide.
Yep.
I've only judged a few times.
Yeah.
And there was a guy there that had like a 32 pickup, and he really wasn't very happy with the result that he got. And one of the first things I said to him, I think you built the wrong car, mate. And he said, what do you mean? This is what a car I've always wanted.
Yeah.
I said, you got half a trim.
Yeah.
You got half a paint job.
Yeah.
And the back half of the car is made out of sheet metal, like square metal.
Yeah.
I said, you buy an 8-ball before you start.
Yeah.
So if you built the car for yourself, great.
Yeah.
But if you build it to win trophies,
Yeah.
you built the wrong one.
Wrong car.
And to me, it's like taking a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're on the back foot the whole time. Yeah. So,
but if that's a car he wanted and he done everything he wanted, that's his
then
trophy.
Be happy with
it. Be happy with
but
it.
But if you're trophy hunting,
right?
No.
Do your research.
Then you need
it's a
to
different
do your research,
Yeah.
and you need to work out if you're trying to go for a class win. I always say to people, if you want to get in the top 60, which as we know, you and I know, it's the top qualifiers in every category, not the top 60 cars.
Correct.
Then pick an easy category.
Yes.
So build a panel van.
I was going to say station wagon. Seen that for many years.
Right?
People do that. Yeah.
Or build do authentic, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if that's your goal.
Yeah.
But if your goal is to own an XY, blah, 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 or a HQ or a BL, then look at the categories and say, I want to tub it and I want to do this. Look at the categories and work out whether you fit in tough street, pro, touring. Yeah. There's a million classes because the top 2 or 3 out of each class effectively has to end up in the hall, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
So if you've got the 3rd best engine in a really average car, it's going to get in the top 60 because it's going to win a trophy potentially in engine. Yeah. So this is the whole thing about understanding the system.
Understanding the system.
And how they get in there. Look, Owen, I've loved this. This is really good. We can talk for hours, as we normally do when we get together. And I don't know how long we've been going, but I think it's been interesting.
No, it's good.
But we need to pull it up. And I think we will find some time to get our heads back together.
Revisit a few things.
And maybe look at some specifics about what we've been talking about. And
awesome.
Being paint and body guys.
And maybe one day I'm thinking, just ahead, straight off my head to you, I wouldn't mind maybe meeting you at an event. It won't be Summernats because we're always too busy, but an event like Show Cars in Melbourne or even Crookville I saw you at the other day, and we could just talk around a few specifics on some cars and if you'd like to do that.
As long as we're being positive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always hard.
More about what we're actually looking for.
At, yes,
than actually.
Yeah, and I think there are some good ones. I'm actually going to go up to the Hot Rod shows up in Sydney this year at Easter.
Yep.
So I'm going to wander up there and with a camera and have a look around because I'm trying to be a little bit diversified. I don't want to be just seen to be doing all Falcons or Summernats type shows.
Yeah. Got it.
But I'm heading up to Cooley Rocks as well again this year. That was a really good show.
A lot of customs, a lot of
and music and dance and
great event.
So thanks very much, Owen, for your time.
Awesome.
And we will definitely be getting our heads back together and bringing you some more valuable information. So thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Isn't it interesting when you look back, and I don't sort of really look back that much, I always looking forward, but when you actually stop and have a bit of a chat like we did today, it's really interesting that we talk about innovation. We were really innovators in our day.
The whole way.
Hey, look at this.
Look
at this. They're like, they are all the top
so,
industry awards.
I think I've had judged at Summernats 3 times. And 3 grand champions. I was the first master craftsman. The second legend. I mean, you just go through it and go, you know what?
So I asked you your first trophy. Which is your favourite?
Look, I think this cabinet sort of fulfills that.
Oh, have a look at it. Yeah.
And there was a goal, specific goal to try and win this one.
Yes.
And we built the car. You know, the car that I'm most known for was for Street Machine of the Year, and that was very specific.